guys, it's Jane, and today's video is all going to be about Joseon Dynasty politics. So yeah, we've done a lot about the Joseon Dynasty. We've covered kings, queens, princes, and even the titles and styles and the class ranks. So basically today's all going to be about the government. So if I'm to sum up Joseon Dynasty government in one word, it's just basically like a Confucianist bureaucracy, so to say. So basically there were a lot of government officials in the Joseon Dynasty political arena, I guess, and they were all ranked in like 18 different ranks, I guess. So they had from 정일품 until 종구품, which is basically like senior first rank to junior ninth rank. And then of course, like any other ranking system, you can move up or you can move down based on your skill, your merit, your examinations, or of course your recommendations, or you pull some strings, you bribe some people. That actually happened, unfortunately, quite a lot in the Joseon Dynasty because Nepo babies existed. There were a lot of very powerful families in Joseon who could very well bribe their sons up the ladder in government, and that's what usually people like to do. And then that's how in later Joseon, political power kind of ended up kind of smushed into just a few families at the very top percentile of Joseon, which wasn't great, but I'll be talking more about this later. So starting at the very top of the government, top tier, the king, obviously, there's the Wan. So yeah, Joseon was a kingdom. It was run by a king. And the king was basically, he was the single most powerful person in the country, and he would not step down. He ruled for life until he abdicated or he was overthrown by a coup. And then you might think, being a king was relatively easy because you were born into it. But actually, if you've heard of how Chinese dynasties were ruled, it was kind of similar. Like they had the mandate of heaven, where Chinese people believed that this heaven chose their emperor, and therefore the emperor has like magical powers that would protect his country, and therefore the emperor would get the blame if there was like a flood or a famine. It was kind of similar in Joseon, how crops weren't doing very well, or if there was natural disaster, then the king would get all the blame. So it was kind of dangerous to be king, to put it simply. And then, big question, how did you join government in Joseon? Obviously, like I explained in my last video, there was a very rigid, very structured class system in Joseon. So obviously, if you're a king, or if you're a chunmin, which means you're like the lowest of the low, or like a slave or a courtesan, you cannot take the civil service. And then if you're a woman, of course, you cannot take the civil service. So how did you join government? There was one thing called 과거, which translates to a civil service examination, kind of like the mandarins like I explained in my previous video. So essentially any man that wasn't a slave could take it. But then if you think about it logically, there weren't a lot of men in Joseon that were, that had time to spare where they could take the books and take resources and study for these exams, because they had to be out in the farmlands or like mining and digging for coal and doing these manual labor in order to feed their families and get food on their table. So actually there was a very small percentage of the top population, the Yangban, who actually could afford to spend their time, looking through books and studying in order to prepare for these exams. So in reality, Joseon government, though it was technically open to the public, it was really only for the top aristocrats. Okay, now jumping into the nitty-gritties of the government. There's the State Council. This is like the biggest, most powerful part of the government. It's the highest body, and it has 12 main officials. So the State Council in Korean is called 의정부, and there's like a top three, like holy trinity of ministers here. They're 영의정, 좌의정, 우의정. So in English, it would be this chief state counselor, left state counselor, and right state counselor. You would have seen these people a lot, like a lot, if you watch like sageuk, because they're usually the bad guys. They're usually depicted as the bad guys because they have so much power. They just have so much influence, so much money. And sometimes they would end up like puppet controlling the king. And then all three of those people are the senior first rank, which is the highest possible rank that a yangban or aristocrat could get to if he was not related to the royalty. And then right underneath these three, right underneath the Holy Trinity, were basically the people, like their assistants basically. There's 좌찬성 and 우찬성, which are the left minister and right minister respectively. So they're like, if there is 좌의정 and 우의정, there's 좌찬성 and 우찬성. So they're like right underneath those two. And they're both junior first rank. So it's kind of like a 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. It's like junior, senior, and then it goes from like a number system. And then of course in the state council there were like other 7 ministers, but then I won't be going into those because otherwise this video would get way too long. So moving on, we have the yukjo. Yukjo is basically 6 ministries if you translate it, and they're like the chief executive body of Joseon, and they're much bigger than the state council. So there are actually 6 main ministries here, which is 이조, 호조, 예조, 병조, 형조, and 공조. So in English, they're the Ministry of Personnel, Taxation, Rights, Defense, Justice, and Works. So as you can guess from the names, 이조, personnel, they're, appointing officials. They're doing the things that are related to hiring new people for the government. And then taxation, finances, census. And then rights, like diplomacy, basically, like the culture of Joseon. And then defense, of course, the government. And then justice, punishments, law, criminals. And then works, industry, public works, mining, these things. And then in these 6 ministries, there are a bunch of different ministers and all of different rank. So the biggest top dogs in this area, in the yukjo, would be the panso. Panso is basically like 2A rank. They're the 3rd highest rank that you can get to in the government. And then right underneath them, you have champan, and then you have chami, and then these are all 당사관 officials. Like these people together, we call them 당사관. And then underneath these people, we have 정랑 and 좌랑. So if we're to take an example of 이조, which is the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Personnel will have 이조 판서, and then they'll have 이조 참판, 이조 참의, and then they'll have 이조 정랑 and 이조 좌랑. So there are a lot of different people in each of these 3 ministries. And then after this, we have something called the 3 offices. Okay, so 삼사. I have had to film this part 5 times, so I'm not in a great mood because my camera decided to shut off and not cooperate with me, but that's okay, I'll just get right into it. 삼사 is basically the 3 offices. So as you can tell from the name, it was consistent of 3 offices. So this is kind of based on morals and the background other than the other 2 that I talked about. So it had a little bit less prestige, but the people in here were still no doubt very popular. Not popular, very powerful. I mean, they were probably popular too, but other than that, they were also very powerful people in these samsa. So the purpose of samsa is to provide checks and balances, kind of like the current US government system where they don't want one branch to have too much power over the other branch. So that's essentially what this samsa did. Okay, and then the first part of this branch, the first branch of this samsa was the Office of the Inspector General, which is called 사헌부. 사헌부 monitored corruption and incompetence, essentially. It was run by 30 officials, and the top one being 대사헌. 대사헌 is the Inspector General, and he basically checks if any of the ministers who are high-ranking are doing something bad behind the scenes. And that's why it was really important to have a good Inspector General, because if you have a corrupt 대사헌, then everyone is getting away with corruption. So essentially your government is going to fall apart. And that's why this particular role of the Inspector General was so important. And that's probably also why it was the junior 2nd rank. So he was a very high-ranking guy. Now the second office was censor, 사관원. 사관원 is basically remonstrating with the king if he made a bad policy. They're the ones saying, like, Your Majesty, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we should, revise that one more time before we actually put that into law. So it was composed of 5 officials, so it's rather small, and it was led by the chief censor, who was 대사관, who was senior 3rd rank. Okay, and then the final branch of this samsa was 홍문관. 홍문관 is the Office of Special Advisors, and probably my personal favorite. So 홍문관 oversaw the Royal Library, and it's kind of served as like a temple of knowledge, like a research institute to study Confucian philosophy and kind of answer the king's philosophical questions. And actually, what's funny is the 3 highest ranking in this branch of samsa were actually serving in the state council. So although they did have a 대제학, the actual person who was really in charge here was a deputy chief scholar who was called 부제학. Okay, guys, so my camera shut down 9 times when I was filming this. So there are probably going to be a lot of cuts in this video, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm so annoyed right now. I've been filming this, I've been talking for the past 90 minutes, and my voice really hurts. But just to end this video on, a nice positive note, if you watch any sageuk or if you watch a drama or if you read a book about the Joseon dynasty, you'll see these titles and styles being used when they talk about the government. So in that way, I hope that my videos provide you a little bit of extra knowledge about the Joseon dynasty, the basics of it. Even if it's not that, I hope my videos are fun to all of you watching. So have a nice day or have a nice night, and I hope you like this video. See you next time. Bye! Oh, an extra note, a notable example of where you can see these titles being used is if you watch The Moon Embracing the Sun, which is a personal favorite drama of mine. You can see the main character, Hoyeonu. She's the daughter of the Homun관 Daejihak. So she's the daughter of the chief scholar of the Office of Special Advisors. So like that, try to relate what you get from my videos into the things that you see online or in a book or something like that. And yeah, hopefully history can be as fun for you as it is for me. Thank you for watching.